Okay. So, come on in. We just got some people just arriving now. So, welcome everyone to this. This is partly our Anthropology 4401 class, but it's nice to have some other folks here too. You're welcome, and Andrew, welcome. The way this will work, so we've done this a few times in the past where we ask alumni of our program to either come in person or Zoom in and talk to us about what they're up to these days. And I'm so happy that we've been able to get, generally when we do this, we're always able to find new people. And the great thing is we find new people who are doing really interesting things. Today is no exception. So I'll start by introducing our three guests. And then I will kick things off with a few questions, but by all means, please ask questions yourselves. The goal here is not to hear from me, realize the irony if I'm speaking, but to hear from our guests. So, Janan, up in the top right there, you can see. So Janan McNaughton is a co-owner of Proofline Farms. Proofline Farm, rather. It's a family farm with a creamery and farm market that will be opening. That is the creamery and farm market will be opening December 9th. So put that on your calendars. It's just north of London. It's about a 10-minute drive from London. Janan completed her BA with us back in 2008. After which she did an MA in social work at University of Toronto and a PhD in social work at University of Edinburgh. More recently, she's been studying marketing management at Fanshop. And by the way, I've gotten all this from LinkedIn, of course. We talked about LinkedIn in the class. Next up, Laura, top middle there, is a skills translation coordinator at Brock University. She's been there for 5 years now. Laura did a BA in bioarchaeological anthropology with us, graduated in 2012, after which she went to Trent for her MA, working on a project entitled, and we're going to ask questions about this, Laura, Hunnic Warfare in the 4th and 5th centuries CE, Archery and the Collapse of the Western Roman Empire. So, sorry?
Punic warfare.
It says Hunnic.
Oh.
Laura, is it Hunnic or Punic?
Hunnic, Huns, as in Attila the.
We gotta trust the expert. All right. And then finally, last but not least, Kay Walker, who we knew as Kay Boucher years ago, who is now a heritage manager with Infrastructure Ontario. Kay first completed her BA with us in 2010, after which she entered our MA program, where she graduated in 2012. And Andrew being here, Kay, might bring back some memories of your thesis, completed under his supervision, in which you focused on biomechanical adaptations in the long bones of hunter-gatherer populations. Is that fair? Great. Welcome all of you to us. So I thought I would start, Laura, we can see you biggest on the screen now, so maybe I'll start with you by asking, so, and it's going to be the same question for everyone. You did a degree with us. We've heard a bit about your education. How did you end up where you are now?
Great question. And I'll kind of start at the end. What I do right now is I'm a skills translation coordinator for the Co-op Career and Experiential Education Department at Brock. So my role is actually to come up with innovative ways to help students translate the skills they're learning in a university context into career readiness or career ready language. So how to make sense of what you're learning and the incredible experiences that you have in a way that will give you some career clarity, but then also help you speak a language that your future employers will understand. So this is very metacognitive for me. The role that I do is kind of what I'm here to talk about too. But when I graduated from Western, like Andrew said, I went to Trent to do my master's in anthropology, which it was a wonderful experience. And I loved it up in Peterborough. But yes, I did study Hunnic archery, Attila the Hun and all of his associates in the fall of the Roman Empire. And I'm happy to get down that rabbit hole with anyone who's curious, because I could talk about it for a while, but just that it was really interesting, the subject matter, but then of course also the skills developed in doing a large project like that. So after I graduated from Trent, I moved to Niagara, where I live now, where Brock is situated. And when I started here, I moved here, I needed a job. So I ended up working for an American telecoms company providing phone data tech support. So I know a weird amount about how home internet works, which has proved useful in my personal life. But it was something that, you know, kind of tided me over. And I worked there for about a year. And about 2 months into that, I got another job as well. I worked for Niagara Workforce Planning Board. It's not called that anymore, but it's in a group of workforce planning boards across Ontario, whose basic function is to provide local labor market data to businesses, to local governments, that sort of thing. So I was a labor market researcher for a few years there. And then I also ran a mentorship program for highly skilled newcomers to Canada. So helping people connect with other people in their field and figuring out strategies to help them transition into their field with their international credentials and that sort of thing. And then 2018, I started here at Brock. I've worked a couple of jobs since I've been here, just doing a secondment. The main one is the one that I just described. I get to do a lot of really neat stuff. I get to do research. We're actually trying to get a paper published with a couple of faculty members. And, you know, I kind of provide support to my colleagues and faculty and students as well. But I also got to spend 6 months as kind of a one-on-one career coach. So the role was titled, and I never remember this, but talent development specialist. So I really helped students make sense of the decisions that they had to make for their career, helped review resumes, cover letters, that sort of thing. So it was really neat to work kind of on the front line of that. But most of my day, most of the work that I do is kind of a bit further removed from students, although I do get to deliver workshops and programming and that sort of thing on occasion. But yeah, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I graduated Western. I knew I wanted to learn more. So that's why I pursued a master's degree, because I was still really interested in learning for learning's sake, but the back of my mind, knowing that I would need to kind of make sense of that to go forward. But yeah, that's sort of where I am. And I don't know if that answers your question or if that was way too much information.
That's great. No, we're gonna have more questions for you, but Janon, can I ask you the same question?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of ended up in an anthropology degree. I changed my degree every year that I was at Western because I was, interested in taking a lot of different courses. By the time I got to the end of my 4th year, I realized I had enough credits to graduate from anthropology, and I enjoyed it, so I stuck with it that final year. And I'm so glad that I did, because it really was a very informative experience for a lot of my other future jobs. So I took some time off after my BA and did some traveling, did like working holiday visa kind of thing. And then I went to U of T in 2009 for Master of Social Work. And yeah, that was a change. There were some people with anthropology backgrounds, but it was a lot more sort of mixed. A lot of people from psych, a lot of people from communications, so I felt I really grew a lot that way, kind of having to explain to people what anthropology was in a new environment. And I was interested in research, so I did continue on to do my PhD. But once I finished that, I realized that I really love community-based research, and I really like applied research. And I just didn't feel like academia was the fit I was looking for my career path. So I just kind of became a digital nomad at that point, and I worked as a freelance writer for about 5 years, traveled around, kind of never saw it as like my real career, but felt I was doing it and it was paying the bills, so that was nice. And then I met my husband here in London when I was home, and his family has a farm, and we had kind of like had this idea about possibly excuse me, taking over the reins at the farm and thinking about transitioning it. It had been really run as sort of a conventional dairy, beef, cash crops farm. and implementing some different, more sustainable practices and opening this creamery that we can sell our products direct to customers, which is why that was sort of during COVID time. I took courses here and there at Fanshawe, the marketing ones, to kind of help me gather information about who my target customer was in London. And yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a long year, but we're finally opening this year and making farm to table gelato on the farm. So I'm pretty excited. Not a normal path, I guess, going into agriculture, but the food system in general, there are a lot of opportunities in London because London's such a regional hub for agriculture and food, that I kind of learned about via having this farm. So that's something I think that I didn't know before, but if you're interested in food, that's a growing sector in London if you're looking to stay in London.
Great, thank you. Before I let you go, best gelato flavor you've got?
I like the chocolate hazelnut. Basically just tastes like melt in your mouth for a rocher. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so you're all sold. Okay, thanks. Kay.
How I got to where I am now, like, is a lot of luck. I did my master's and then I just wanted to start making money. And pretty much the only job that I could find that wasn't academia was consultant archaeology. So I was in the field, like, digging and screening for 3 years. It was really rough because I'm not like a strong person. I don't go to the gym. And it was like hell. I don't know if any of you have done it, but I don't know, once you push past like the first season, it starts to get easier. You start to get used to just being in never-ending pain. And then after a while, I realized I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. So I applied for a job at the Ministry of Culture. They're the regulating body for archaeology in Ontario. So all archaeological work done in Ontario has to go to the ministry for approval. And I was like, yeah, I want to work for like the company that, or the overseers of archaeology. Like, that sounds cool. But I was not qualified for that job at all. I'd only been in the field 3 years. But I got the job and was very surprised. And they said the reason that I got the job was actually because I had done a summer student program with the ministry in London. London has a ministry office out on, what's that, Highbury Ave or something. So I did a couple summer internships there, and they were like, oh yeah, we like the idea of, you were our summer student, so we want to bring you back. Like, I was like, okay, great. I mean, that's cool. I worked there for a year on contract, and I was not wanting to go back to consulting. I didn't want to go back to the blood, sweat, and tears of the field. As much as it was like great, working outside was really awesome. Like, it's really healthy for you, but there's a little bit of a toxic environment, I'll just say. So then I applied for this job at Infrastructure Ontario, which is another kind of government job. But this time, instead of like approving archaeology reports, I would be managing archaeological assessments across the province, which again, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I get to be the boss. But I applied for this job, again, was not qualified at all for this job. I have no idea how I got it. They just were like, oh, we like that, you were friendly and personable and you seem moldable. So like, sometimes even if you think you're not qualified, just apply, because sometimes jobs are willing to give you like on the job training to get you up to where they want. And sometimes they like if you don't have a lot of experience, because then they can kind of mold and craft you the way that they want, which is what they did. And I've been a faithful, loyal government servant for the last 7 or 8 years now. I've been at Infrastructure Ontario, where we manage property that's owned by the province. So if the province wants to build something like a courthouse, say, or a new jail, we have to do a lot of work in order to construct that, whatever it is. Some of it involves like environmental contamination, so cleaning up any contamination on the property. We do appraisals, we do surveys, and then we do archaeological work. So that's my job, is I will hire consultants to go and do assessments for some really cool properties, because they're owned by the province. So some of our awesome properties are like, we own Ontario Place, and that's a really contentious issue right now. But yeah, we own that property, so we're doing the work there. We're also working on the new Ontario Line subway in Toronto. I know maybe like you guys don't care about what's going on in Toronto because I don't know, but it's really cool. It's like a new subway that they're building in Toronto, and we're working on that too. So we get to see really awesome projects that the province is doing.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks, Dave. So I mentioned I looked at your LinkedIn pages. I've got one more question for each of you. This is like a game show or something like that. Based on your LinkedIn page. So Laura, I'll start with you. And as you said in your earlier comments, you have a unique perspective on one of the things we're doing in this course, which is thinking about how what we study in anthropology specifically is relevant in the wider world. And I wonder if you in your current position, I don't think Brock has an anthro program. There might be anthro courses, but does it?
They have classics and archaeology.
Yeah.
That's the department, yeah.
So, but knowing what you know about anthropology, if an anthropologist student walked into your office for a one-on-one consultation, what would you tell them about the value of their degree?
That's a great question. And I love it because that is something that comes up in my role. And whether I talk one-on-one with students or talk to faculty about how they can support their students, one of the great things about anthropology is it gives you such a unique perspective on how people relate to themselves, how people relate to other people around them, and how people relate to the communities, plural, that they're a part of. And it kind of gives you that kind of in-group, out-group perspective that a lot of maybe fields don't necessarily. I also have my double major was history as well. So that's a entirely different way of looking at the way people relate to each other and the way information relates to people. It's more, a few steps backward, but anthropology, that's one of the most fascinating things. It's about studying people in every way, shape, or form. And I did bioarch specifically, but to get an anthropology degree at Western, you have to have parts of the whole. And I think the skills that you hone and you develop by reading the material that we have access to read in anthropology, by engaging in the labs, by just learning the theories and the way to look at people and look at the world, it gives you a unique perspective that I think we start to take for granted the more we learn, but that not everybody sees the world that way or has access to those skills or that particular worldview. And I know that's an extremely general answer, but anthropology is not one thing. It's so many different things. So it really would depend on the student.
That's great. No, that's terrific. Thank you. All right, Janan, you're next. You're gonna regret all the things you put on your LinkedIn page. So Janan, your statement at the start, in your statement on the top of your page, you write, "I thrive when I have the space to use my critical thinking, strategic analysis, relationship building, problem solving skills in real world situations." And you stress a desire to have an impact on the world. And I'm not gonna hold you to anthropology, but your studies in general, the things you did, say between the ages of 18 and 26 or whatever it is, where you were in school doing these projects, did that help you to be able to do these things that you do or that you want to do?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of those skills, were based in anthropology. So I was a sociocultural student. And I think in hindsight, a lot of my interest in anthropology was applying it to myself because I'm a mixed race person. And I was really fascinated by looking at, I applied a lot of the theory to myself. I don't know, I think people think of psychology as a field too, where people, go into it to learn about themselves. But for me, anthropology gave me a lot of clarity on my own self and my strengths from my specific position. Everyone will be from a different position, but I do find it interesting, like Laura had mentioned that she worked with newcomers, and I also worked with newcomers after I finished my social work degree. And I think it's sort of a natural fit there because you have people who are navigating very difficult transitions, with all the practical elements, moving to Canada, but also the emotional side of it and the personal side of it. And so those understanding those issues for me all came from anthropology. I think that if I had done maybe a psych degree, I wouldn't be able to see some of those bigger picture challenges that people face. And I would lean more towards, individualizing a problem, which is not something, when we think about a lot of the topics that are very popular in society today, things like mental health, right? Trying to erase the stigma and not individualize it and think about how society contributes to stigma. So I think I learned a lot more about how my anthropology skills were helpful after I left the degree and kind of got into those real world situations where that's where I realized other people aren't looking at it like this, especially in my social work experience. It was a little bit more, therapeutic techniques for an individual or clinical work like that. Whereas for me, I kind of was like, well, yes, but I'm much more interested in that sort of the systemic issues, the structural issues that I had a sort of lens from anthropology for.
That's good. Sorry, you can't see me. I'm nodding madly as you're all talking. Just assume I'm standing here nodding. All right, Kay, it's your turn now. So Kay, and not another thing. One other reason I know Kay a little better than some students is Kay was a student in 2010 who came with Professor Cahoon and me to Madagascar. That was the 2010 group. And so, and one of the things I remember, and Kay, I mentioned to you in an email, people still ask about you. People in this community where you were staying. Yeah.
That's so nice.
And one of the things is obviously you get along with people get along with you. Maybe that's part of what was coming out in your interview. But you mentioned on your LinkedIn profile again that in your current job you have to work with a lot of different people. Like people, managers, planners, archaeologists, heritage specialists, provincial, municipal government, which have their own things, then First Nations government, Métis government. And I'm guessing that with all of those different people come a lot of different perspectives, maybe even on the same issues. And I'm curious if how you deal with that and whether your experiences in anthropology or thinking with anthropology have ever helped you with that.
It's so funny that you honed in on that, because I was just writing some notes and that's exactly what I wrote down too, is that I feel really lucky that I did anthropology at Western, because Western's one of the few anthropology departments that encourages students to, well, I don't know if it's encouragement or more requires students to have the 4 field coverage for their degree. So other schools like U of T, if you're in more of the biological side of anthropology, that's really kind of all you see. Whereas at Western, they encourage you to get a 4 field approach. And so when I left school and I was I was focusing on archaeology, that's just one of the subfields, right? But now in my current job, I work with First Nations governments all the time, and it is much more of like a sociocultural perspective at this point. So now we're at like an intersection of, okay, we're doing archaeology together, but in the modern day and working with these modern communities that have very modern concerns, right? They're not frozen in the past and they don't necessarily care about hunting and fishing anymore. They want economic opportunities and growth for their community. So yeah, it's really like, I think it was really important for me to have that perspective from Western of getting a more like fulsome view of anthropology. I'd say like I use information that I learned in my degree like every single day. And also I will mention that if you want to pursue archaeology in Ontario, in order to get your professional license, you actually have to have a master's degree. So that's another good reason to get your master's if you want to do archaeology.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to the class. I've got more questions, but does anyone have any questions for Paul? I'm gonna just move this a little closer.
I can. Thank you. 8K, can you hear me? Perfect. My name's Paul. My question to you, if I can figure this out as it comes up my mouth, is I'm really interested in kind of your line of work, more so the planning side of it. Do you have any like recommendations or tips for what kind of work I should be looking for post grad to try to do something that you're doing?
Like urban planning?
Yeah.
That's the smartest thing ever. You really like 100%. I really think you should do that.
Well,
Because
no.
I was even thinking like at one point I was like, did I like pigeonhole myself into this very niche thing like Ontario archaeology and that's all I can do now? And I even was thinking of going for like my planning certification.
Right on,
Because
cool.
yeah, because planners, like you can get so many jobs. You can work for like any sort of government level of government. So provincial, federal, municipal, like any municipality across Ontario. But there's also government agencies. So the one I work for, we're not really a ministry, we're an agency. So we do work for the government, but we often work with like other consulting agencies that have planners on staff. Like, and I'm always blown away by the career opportunities available for planners. It's like you could go anywhere, you could work anywhere, and you have a lot more leverage in order to negotiate a good salary, which is again something I'm interested in, is like the money, right? So in planning, I think you could actually do really decent.
Cool, super cool. Thank you. I guess, and then part two to that question, A, thank you. B, part two is looking like at like maybe specific work. Is there anywhere I should be like, yeah, I know you mentioned like government agencies and things like that. Any kind of recommendations for like specific ones? Like, is there like a field that you think is better suited to more entry level applicants, or is that kind of just like if they have it?
I mean, I would say try Infrastructure Ontario, seriously,
Okay.
because we like it's such a great place to work. I'm not just saying that. And like there's a lot of flexibility. Like you're in my office right now. I work from home. You can go into the office if you want. It's in Toronto, but yeah, they actually like I live in Bancroft. I never go into Toronto. The pay is really good, the people are amazing, and then the projects are so cool because it's like provincial work. You get to do so many cool things that like you wouldn't be able to do in any other job. So I don't know, check out IO. I really think it's a great place to work. And I think for entry level it'd probably be fine. I wish I had more recommendations, but I'm not a planner. If you want, I can try to get some recommendations from my colleagues and then I'll give them to Andrew and he can pass on to you.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Okay, sure.
Oh, real. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No problem.
And Andrew's got a question.
It's not a question. I just wanted to add on to that. My wife had a master's degree in archaeology, and she ended up being the heritage planner for the city of Alumni.
No kidding.
Ah.
Oh.
Yeah,
That's
the
so cool.
application was calling for a degree in geography and urban planning and all that sort of stuff. But she got involved in the heritage, the civic heritage committee or something like that. And so she got to know the sort of landscape here. And then when the job came up, she went for it.
Right on, cool. Thank you. I appreciate that, actually. Sweet. I'm writing that down. I'm putting that down right now. Perfect.
Elise.
Yeah, planning is awesome.
I've got a question for Laura about her master's project there for the stuff. Of course, it's silly and simple about like being archaeologist and that stuff. What's your like favorite find, I guess, for it, from if you remember, or something that you from like your area or something like that? I have.
Yeah. Oh, I could answer that question so many ways. Thank you. I think the most, I guess, impressive find was sort of the lack thereof. I think the biggest awakening moment that I had trying to look at funerary archaeology for mounted horse archers is that it's really hard to find any archaeological remains because the Eurasian steppe is huge. And we were talking about a kind of warfare that is very specific, very nomadic, very, you'd have to dig up the whole step in order to find really the kind of data that you'd be looking for. So I think that the biggest lesson that doing my master's thesis, attempting to look at essentially one of the areas I looked at was what's buried with warriors in this context, right? How can we figure out what the importance of archery was and certain types of warfare based on funerary remains with such limited information, you'd have to extrapolate, which is something that archaeologists help historians do, archaeologists help anthropologists do. I think that the kind of broad spectrum kind of learning was you can learn just as much about what you don't find as what you do find, which is incredibly frustrating sometimes, especially when you're attempting to write your thesis and to come up with kind of a coherent argument. But it's sort of fascinating how much there is still left to know about past peoples, especially past peoples who have no written history, like the Huns, nomadic, as far as we know, not literate, didn't write records. And the only records we have are from the perspective of the Romans and their government and their historians, which you can imagine that what we know about people from a third party is going to be flawed and skewed and that kind of thing. So sort of a roundabout answer to your question. And then I guess just one of the things that I love about what I studied in the bioarch aspect, especially at Western, is just an ongoing fascination with the human body and what you can learn from somebody based on their skeletal remains. Last year, actually, I shattered my olecranon process quiz for all the bioarch students, what that is. Multiple pieces, the surgeon used the word exploded. So I learned practically how very complicated an elbow joint is, and I'll never be able to straighten my arm again because that is how intricately put together our bodies are. So knowing in my head that if archaeologists from the year 3000 dig me up, they're going to see a titanium elbow joint and go, what happened there? And so I think just my experience at Western and anthropology and bioarch, just I'm fascinated by things that gross most people out. But I love it. And I'm a weird wealth of information about that sort of thing that doesn't typically come up in my job, but that's something that I've held, very closely in the years since. Hopefully that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up if I can. Not for you, Laura, but it's kind of connected to you. It comes from just hearing you talk about your work that you did. You finished what, about 8 years ago or so, but you speak about it with the same excitement, I think, as you might, and also even talking about how an injury made you think like an anthropologist. I was just saying to the class that this is one of the things we do. We don't just apply anthropology in work, but we also apply these things in our lives to make sense of things. And Janan, that I was actually thinking of what you were describing about how you were using anthropology to think about yourself in your own experience. But I wonder specifically now with this new venture, which I think many would say, well, this is so far away from anthropology. When you're making gelato or thinking about cattle or any of these things, now I'm really going out on a limb. Do you think like an anthropologist, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same principles with our marketing approach, understanding our target audience. I mean, I see a lot of connections, but that is what I bring to the project, because my husband was a history major who then worked in food systems. And then his family has worked in agriculture their whole life. So I'm the only one there with an anthropological perspective. And we really need that, especially with the expansion, because we're going from, our milk, like focusing on just the farm and the systems and processes we have here, to being like a direct to consumer business. And so all of a sudden, like, we need to know a lot about, who lives around us, what are they looking for in food products, what is financially viable for us to provide, everything from like brand development to product development. I think that's where I see a lot of the connections with anthropology to the food system. And whether it's in a large business, or there's a lot of food entrepreneurs in London. Like, London is has the Foodpreneur program. Fanshawe has a great culinary program. Like there's so many things happening around food in London that, you know, those are any entrepreneur needs the skills of anthropology. So whether or not it's food, but I just see it a lot more in food and how people understand or don't, because I mean, we've all walked into, you know, a store or whatever, and you know, it's not what you thought it was going to be. The experience isn't what you thought it was going to be, right? Or the brand just kind of missed the mark on what you were looking for. It's all guesswork, really. I mean, we're launching right now pretty much just on guesswork that is informed by, we did a survey, you know, we talked to people, we interviewed people, and then it'll just be a very iterative process as we go forward, right? Talking to people even more, finding out what they want as we grow.
Yeah, no, that sounds right, and it's actually sounds very familiar in, you know, this is how we do research in sociocultural anthropology, rather than go in, but here's the plan and we know exactly how it's gonna come out. We tend to go in slowly like that.
Yeah, and it's not just like, you know, learning about people to like sell them things. For me, it's very important to find the match between what urban consumers are looking for and rural businesses that are trying to get their products into a larger market so they can grow. And so that contributes to rural economic development. So I think there's nothing wrong with trying to understand people to bring products to them that they're interested in. Our values are just a lot more based on sort of that community perspective, where this is a mutually beneficial relationship, where we have a store in a very good location and we're working with farmers like up near Godrich, Grand Bend, you know, further north, like Elgin County, all around, to help them grow as well. So
Yeah, and I see, yeah, that's, as Kay was saying, that's, or we're sorry, but that's, you know, seeing things from different perspectives, I guess, it's really important. Other questions from the. I've got one more. That I'm gonna ask each of you. Maybe starting with Kay. Now I'm really gonna put you on the spot, which is, so you're now. So Kay, you're 10 years past your finishing your MA. So are there times, so you say, you mentioned earlier, you think you use anthropology every day. Are there specific things, we're in this position, or students are in this position, like if you imagine the people in this class, they are now where you were 15 years ago. And are there things you do, whether every day or not, where you think about actually things you might have learned or thought about or encountered, experiences, whatever, during your time as a student? And again, whether it's necessarily about anthropology or any other thing.
The thing that's coming to mind as you're talking is dealing with conflict, like, because I deal with conflict quite a bit. Like, I have people very angry at me on a regular basis. I represent the Crown, and I go and I speak to First Nations who are very angry at the Crown. And when they have someone from the Crown sitting down across the table from them, they often take the opportunity to yell and say really mean things, none of which is personal, right? And I think that the way that I find the use in my degree playing out in my job now is that I approach conflict with curiosity now, as opposed to, you know, taking it personally or jumping to defend myself. Like, everything is just you know, yeah, it's like I'm more inquisitive as opposed to argumentative. And I think that actually is my greatest strength right now, to be honest. And I do think that I got that from being in university and from being in the anthropology program, I think fostered this kind of curiosity about people. And even like, yeah, when we went to Madagascar and we're interviewing people at that point and trying to understand like, okay, what, you know, what is your perspective? Like, what are you bringing to the table? And I want to know from your eyes, like, what do you see? And discovering that it's very different. You can have the same situation and people are viewing it in very, very different ways, right? So I think that kind of like curiosity is something that I bring to work every day, and it kind of has helped me become a stronger person when dealing with conflict now. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. That's a terrific answer. Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, I was gonna say curiosity too, but I think for different reasons. So I think it's really neat that you shared that, because that's one of the parts of my job that I love is I never have the same day twice, and I get to explore areas of interest. I get to go down rabbit holes, and that sort of exercises my curiosity. But I think from an anthropological perspective specifically, I work in a post-secondary institution, and they're really unique environments. It's basically like a city in a block of buildings, and you have lots of different types of people who are there for a lot of different reasons, who have different goals, different processes, different ways of doing things, different experiences. And so I'm constantly interacting with people with entirely different end games in mind, entirely different life stories. I talk to students, I talk to faculty, I talk to senior administration, everybody in between. So the language of communicating with those people will naturally be different. And I find the curiosity comes in because it does involve some conflict, or just when I'm trying to move forward on a project, some people have issues with very specific parts of that. Other people have different issues with that, depending on where they're coming from. For example, a lot of our faculty members like to copy edit things. And I'm like, well, that's not why we're at this meeting, but thank you for your input. So some of the minor focus versus with all the love in my heart, I'm curious. It doesn't annoy me. It doesn't bother me. I find it fascinating that all the different groups of people that I get to interact with daily have entirely different ways and reasons for looking at what I'm looking at. And really it kind of is a study on identity, right? Understanding identity and what is important to people individually and what is important to them as it relates to the groups that they identify with, and how the different versions of themselves interact, and being able to watch that in essentially a petri dish of a post-secondary institution. And it was a glass shattering moment for me, because being a student at a university is entirely different than working at a university, and just what we see, what we don't see, what is created in certain spaces for different reasons. It's fascinating, but I like to find ways that I can open myself to whatever the perspective is in their room and make sense of what people are feeling. And it's usually strong feelings, especially right now when all universities are in a bit of a budgetary crisis. So everyone comes into meetings very high strung about very different things with their very different goals. And this is important versus this is important. So how I see myself within that, and the curiosity, like Kay said, figuring out where people are coming from and leaving space for that, and to not try to correct that or fix that per se, but to find a way to work within it and with it. So I think that sort of people in relation to their identity, group, and self, I think that's one of the biggest anthropological things that I pull through every day here at a university.
That's fantastic. And I'll just say something that students might not know, that we are the smallest department in the faculty. But we've got a lot of, we've always had a representation upstairs, or often, I should say. Andrew was up there for a long time. That is the people who have to do exactly what Laura's talking about, and sort of manage people, often manage angry people or whatever. Kim Clark is up there now. Of course, the dean right now, Nick Harney, an anthropologist, is also an anthropologist. But there might be something there. I think that's a really interesting point, Laura. And thanks too, because I realize I'm very angry with someone right now, but I should be generous and curious about them. So thanks for the reminder. Janan?
I think for me, it's the listening skills that I use the most, that everything from like a job interview to working with a new business partner. I think sometimes, you know, especially when we graduate, either from, you know, BAs or MAs or whatever, you feel like you have to have all the answers and you know, go into job interviews like I know this and I know this and I know this. And sometimes I think taking a pause to listen to the person and not just sort of jump in and just talk for the sake of talking can go miles, you know. And I think that is a really underestimated skill that we get from being able to do those exploratory interviews where we don't just have like a prescribed list of questions that we want the answers to. Sets you up really nicely to be able to pivot. It kind of goes to what Kay was saying about being moldable. You know, also just not having your own agenda all the time, because the employer or your business partners or, you know, grant funders or whoever it is, you know, they have their own boxes to check as well. And you will probably do better if you understand from their side, rather than just trying to tell them why you're the best without understanding what they're looking for.
A good attitude goes way further than any amount of knowledge that you could have.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any other questions? Okay, I have one specific one and then one closing one, if that's okay. Can you spare another 10 minutes? Yeah, so the specific one, and we heard a bit about it in in what you said about your journey to where you are now. But it seems like in several cases at least, work you've done before where you are now, maybe volunteering or kind of work that was hard work, but outside of work you weren't being paid for or being paid very little for. How important do you think that is? So these kinds of things, because I think it is one of the bits of advice students graduating often get is, and there are legitimate concerns. Okay, does that make sense? Should I be working for free or not? I mean, it seems exploitative. Well, do you have any thoughts on that?
Volunteering, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. That transitioning into work, maybe through volunteering first.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like I was volunteering in the Davidson lab. I don't know if there's currently any artifact washing opportunities that you guys have going on right now, but yeah, even just artifact washing in the lab at Western, like just do something.
That's great. Janine or Laura?
Yeah, I never got jobs directly from volunteering. But those people did provide me with, you know, letters of reference and things like that. And also just sort of helped me explore that more like applied use of my degree. So for me, it didn't matter so much where I was volunteering. It was more getting something on my resume that was a bit more relatable, because I did kind of go into the nonprofit sector a bit. So I was able to demonstrate, you know, experience on a resume for that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. There's a lot of chatter about it in post-secondary space about the ethics of unpaid internships and unpaid opportunities as a co-curricular option for students. And I think privilege comes into the conversation at the forefront too. I know I worked 2 jobs while doing my undergraduate degree, so I walked out of that without student debt. It was a choice that I made, but definitely volunteering is wonderful, but make sure that all of your needs are met as a human being, and you know, don't be in a place where you feel like you're being exploited, I guess. But on a lighter note, truly though, my role and the role of my department is to encourage students to see the nonlinear in their career path as valuable and what makes them stand out. And what I would just say is experience of any kind is all about what you make of it. It's, you know, being able to reflect on who you are before you do something, how that thing you're doing is changing you, and what that means for you and your goals after you do something. And that kind of clarity can come from any type of experience. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one. This is an archaeology experience because I want to be an archaeologist. And what Kay was saying too, how you present during an interview, the kind of person that you are, the vibe you give off, right? Those things are often weighed a lot heavier than you had specific internships with specific places that, you know, and this aligns skill wise, because they're going to want to teach you themselves, especially entry level jobs. They're not going to expect you to know how to do everything. And if you do, they're going to try to train it out of you to do it their way. So I think that, you know, any experience you have, whether that's paid in a weird field that you don't think is related, or volunteering, or both, or anything like that, it's really about how you position it and how you can frame your skill development through those experiences. So any experience, clubs, teams, volunteering, work of any kind, they're hugely important. So don't undervalue yourselves, because I know everyone in this room has developed the skills that they need. It's just about getting past that gap of, okay, what do those mean to my future employer? Or if I'm applying for grad school, what does that mean for the committee and that sort of thing?
That's great. Thank you so much. No questions from you. All right, so my last question is, whenever I do these things, it's always the last question. Again, thinking back to where you were, 15, 10, 8, however many years ago. Any last advice for a room full of mostly sort of, you know, people in their 4th year, thinking about what's ahead, some thinking about grad school, some not sure. Any advice at all, life, work, anthropology, anything? Okay.
Okay, I wish that somebody told me this. I wish that somebody had said to me, the teachers are just people. Because I was always nervous to talk to teachers because I didn't want to seem dumb. But when you're a student, like, this is your one free pass that no one's expecting you to be super smart. Like, you get a free pass on being stupid and dumb. So don't worry about looking dumb. Don't worry about looking dumb to your teachers. Like, and the funny thing is like, I've seen Andrew dance and like break down like crazy, like dancing. And it's like, oh yeah, he's just a person.
What do we say? Okay, that's fine.
But like, my point is that if you feel like you're gonna look stupid or something, I mean, that's the whole point. I still ask stupid questions to this day, but the funny thing is that now I'm not afraid to ask stupid questions, even though I'm supposed to know more things now. And then when I didn't know things back in school, I was like, oh, I can't look stupid. Like, that would just be the worst. And I don't know, I just wish that I had seen teachers as just like regular people that you can go and talk to and not be afraid of looking dumb in front of them. Anyways, that's my thing. That's my last thing. Oh, and okay, this is pretty nerdy of me, but there's a book that I recommend that changed my life. I know that sounds weird, but it really did. It's, if you've ever heard of this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That book helped me be a more personable person. And I'm telling you, like, the things that he says in that book will help you in interviews and will help you get jobs. So, fantastic book. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Dave. Laura or Janan?
Sure. I think my advice is sort of twofold, similar, but kind of different. Be curious, talk to people. If someone is doing something that you find interesting, ask them about it, schedule what we call an information interview. Really just talk to people whose work fascinates you, because usually people love talking about themselves. And if you're not asking directly for something that they can't do for you, like, can I have a job, please? If you just want to know about what they're doing and what their background is and where they got to where they are, people usually will love to tell you that stuff. And it can really help you make some tricky decisions about where to take your next steps. It's not what do I want to do for the rest of my life, it's what do I want to try next. So a great way to get some personal clarity on that is just ask people whose jobs you think are cool, and know that a lot of the jobs that will exist when you're ready to enter the labor force, they may not exist yet. So just talk to interesting people. And then also, and this is sort of advice for myself too, but if you're fascinated by something, if there's something in your program, in your life as an anthropology student that really resonates with you, you can follow that in any aspect of your life. It doesn't have to be your career. I miss being a student of anthropology, but I found a way to incorporate actually doing that into my life. My husband's a high school teacher, and I have a relationship with the school he teaches at now that I come in every year and deliver archaeology labs to students in psychology, anthropology, and sociology. So I get to resurrect some of my life as a TA and to actually go into do a lab with high school students and hopefully spark some curiosity in them. And so that's a way that I can meaningfully use anthropology and the actual experiences that I have. I don't get paid to do anthropology. It happens in the background. It's part of my life, but I love doing it. And I found a way to kind of keep it in my life. So if there's something that fascinates you, you don't have to make it your entire career. It may not be feasible to do that, but there are always ways to kind of find little passions and interests everywhere. So don't be afraid to be curious.
That's great, thank you. Last word to
Those are
John.
all good ideas. Yeah, I would just say like trust yourself and talk to people who you like, sort of the same idea with the informational interview, but beyond just even jobs, like talk to people that seem happy and that seem fulfilled and kind of pick their brain on how they got there. Because I think what you'll find is a lot of people take those nonlinear paths, and it's not something to be afraid of. In 10 years or whatever, you'll be the one sitting here telling the next group of graduates about your really interesting choices and all that. So I would just say, just trust yourself, and the choices you've made thus far that have got you to where you are, and you'll be fine in the next stage.
Oh, thank you so much. Can we thank him with a round of applause? So we've had you for an hour. Thanks again. Okay, thanks again for doing this. And I'll shut it down, but I'll email you later today with something I still need from you. But all the best, and we'll see you on LinkedIn, if not elsewhere.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.